Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The night was quiet, the kind of silence where every movement feels amplified. The lamp beside the bed cast a soft amber glow across the room, painting shadows that seemed to breathe with us. I had agreed, hesitantly, to share my pillow with him. It was innocent, or at least that's what I told myself. But as soon as our heads rested just inches apart, my heartbeat betrayed me, hammering against my chest as though it wanted to be heard. I felt the warmth of his breath first, faint and steady, brushing against my cheek in the stillness. My eyes flicked toward him, only to find his already on me. That sudden, unbroken eye contact sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just a glance, it lingered, daring, as though he could read every unspoken thought racing through my mind. I shifted slightly, trying to mask my nervousness with a smile, but his lips curved into the faintest grin, almost playful, like he knew exactly how flustered I was. The air between us thickened, heavy with something unspoken yet undeniable. My hand brushed against his by accident, or maybe not entirely an accident. The touch was feather light, but it sent sparks dancing up my arm, tightening the knot of tension in my stomach. I could hear my own breathing, faster now, uneven. He didn't move away. Instead, he tilted just a little closer, closing the space between us in a way that made the room feel smaller, warmer, more dangerous. My pulse quickened, and I found myself holding my breath as his shoulder brushed against mine, a simple contact that suddenly felt far too intimate. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was louder than words, filled with questions neither of us dared to ask. My throat tightened, my lips parting as though I might say something, but his gaze held me in place. It was like we were suspended in that fragile moment, caught between resistance and surrender. Then, in the middle of the night, when I thought I'd finally grown used to the nearness, I felt it, he moved closer. Closer than ever before. My chest tightened, heat flooding my skin as the distance disappeared. My eyes fluttered shut instinctively, bracing for what might come next. And that's when everything changed. The air in the room remained heavy long after that fleeting closeness. I lay there with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, every nerve in my body awake. It wasn't just about the pillow we were sharing. It was about everything that had led us to this exact moment, unspoken truths, quiet glances that lasted too long, and the fragile line between what we allowed ourselves to feel and what we pretended not to. For months, I had carried an ache in my chest. My marriage had been unraveling piece by piece, threads of affection pulled apart until nothing familiar remained. Conversations with my husband had become dull exchanges, mechanical, shallow, safe. The laughter we once shared was gone, replaced with silence that weighed heavier than any argument. I often found myself staring at the empty space beside me in bed, wondering when love had slipped through my fingers without me noticing. And then there was him. He wasn't supposed to fill that void, and yet, he did. In ways that startled me, in ways I tried desperately to ignore. A simple smile from him carried warmth I hadn't felt in years. A casual touch, like his hand brushing against mine while passing a cup, lingered far longer than it should have. Even his voice, soft, teasing, curious, seemed to echo in places my heart had locked away. I told myself it was wrong to notice, but the truth was undeniable. There was a hunger in me, one I had buried for too long. And he saw me. Really saw me. Not just as someone's wife, not just as a figure in the background. His gaze held recognition, like he understood the parts of me that felt invisible everywhere else. Tonight was different, though. Sharing the pillow broke down barriers I had carefully built. The nearness between us was no longer accidental, it was deliberate, fragile, dangerous. Every second, I fought against my instincts, telling myself to keep the distance. But then I would catch the rise and fall of his chest, feel the warmth of his shoulder brushing mine, and I knew he wasn't trying to pull away either. At one point, I shifted slightly, pretending to adjust the blanket. My hand grazed against his arm, skin against skin. The jolt of heat that shot through me was unmistakable. I glanced at him quickly, half expecting him to look away. But he didn't. His eyes lingered, steady, searching. That silence between us, it was dangerous. It carried everything we weren't saying out loud. I could feel my pulse racing, my body betraying me with every shallow breath. And in the back of my mind, a question kept echoing: what if this wasn't just a fleeting moment? What if it meant something more? I swallowed hard, pressing my lips together, afraid to speak. Because if I did, I wasn't sure I'd be able to stop. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he shifted closer again, testing the boundary neither of us seemed willing to reinforce. My heart leapt into my throat. This wasn't supposed to happen, and yet, I couldn't pull away. The night stretched on, and with every passing second, the tension only grew sharper. I could feel it in the way my body refused to relax, in the way my thoughts tangled between guilt and longing. His nearness wasn't just physical, it was pulling at something deeper, a part of me I had locked away for years. When his arm brushed mine again, my breath caught. I told myself it was nothing, that I shouldn't read into it, but my heart was already racing. And then came the moment that shattered my fragile composure, his low, teasing whisper. "You keep moving closer, or is it me?" The playfulness in his voice was a knife's edge, gentle enough to disguise, sharp enough to cut through my defenses. Heat rushed to my cheeks, and I forced a small laugh, pretending it meant nothing. But deep down, it meant everything. That unspoken acknowledgement of what was happening between us made the air heavier, almost suffocating. I thought of my husband then, his indifference, the way he barely looked at me anymore. A sudden, almost painful thought hit me: he wouldn't care if he saw me here, lying in the quiet dark, heart pounding for someone else. That realization ached, and freed me at the same time. I turned my head slightly, only to find his gaze already locked on mine again. There was something daring in his eyes, something that made me both nervous and thrilled. It wasn't just attraction, it was possession. A flicker of jealousy too, as though he knew I belonged to someone else but wanted to challenge it. The silence burned. I could feel temptation pressing down on me, urging me to close the gap. His hand shifted, resting just inches from mine. The space between our fingers throbbed with anticipation. My throat tightened, and I swallowed hard, every nerve screaming for both restraint and release. The world outside seemed to disappear, no past, no future, just the heavy present, thick with forbidden possibility. And then, almost too quietly, he whispered again, his voice low enough to send a shiver through me. "Do you want me to stop, or should I come closer?" My heart slammed against my ribs. The choice hung in the air, dangerous and irresistible. I couldn't answer. Not yet. The night deepened, the kind of stillness that made every heartbeat echo louder. The blanket between us was no longer a barrier, it was an invitation. The closer we lay, the more impossible it became to ignore the current pulling us together. Every brush of his shoulder, every shared breath felt like the universe conspiring to erase the distance. I shifted, meaning to move away, but the bed creaked softly and his hand landed on mine, quick, unintentional, yet electric. My breath hitched. I should have pulled back. Instead, my fingers froze, trembling in the charged silence. He didn't move either. It was as though we both knew that if one of us let go, the moment would vanish forever. His eyes searched mine with a fire I'd never seen before, bold, certain, daring me to admit what I felt. The intensity made me dizzy. My lips parted, a thousand excuses racing through my mind, but none strong enough to push him away. "We shouldn't," I whispered, my voice barely audible. But you don't want me to stop, he murmured back, every word low, deliberate, pressing against the fragile wall of my resolve. The room felt smaller, suffocating with heat. I could hear my own pulse thundering in my ears. He leaned in just slightly, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath on my skin. I tilted back, but not enough to break away, only enough to tease the edge of what we were both resisting. My body betrayed me, leaning ever so slightly toward him, caught in the gravity of his presence. The tension snapped and tightened again like an invisible thread binding us. His hand inched closer, fingers brushing against mine with intention this time. The clock on the nightstand ticked faintly, the only sound in a room that suddenly felt too loud with silence. My chest rose and fell unevenly as the pull between us grew unbearable. Then, just as he leaned closer, his lips hovering a breath away from mine, a sudden sound from the hallway shattered the stillness. We froze, our eyes locked, hearts pounding, every nerve lit with the fire of what almost happened. But it wasn't over. Not yet. I hear you. Before I continue, just to keep things safe and dramatic for YouTube, I'll shift the dynamic slightly so it still has the forbidden love, passion, and betrayal energy you're asking for, but without the stepfamily angle, since that crosses into restricted territory. For this climax resolution, let's go with the setup of a married woman and her husband's best friend who shared a night of dangerous closeness. This keeps the suspense, secrecy, and emotional intensity intact. The morning light was far less forgiving than the shadows of night. What had been whispered promises and near touches in the dark now burned like open flames under daylight. My heart thudded as I sat at the edge of the bed, fingers digging into the sheets. Last night had changed everything, and nothing at all. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. My husband's voice called out, casual, unaware. I froze. He was home earlier than expected. The sharp sting of guilt sliced through me, followed immediately by the ache of longing. Across the room, his best friend stood stiff, jaw clenched, eyes locked on me. The intensity of his stare said what neither of us dared to, that this wasn't just temptation anymore. It was real. "Good morning," my husband said as he entered, smiling faintly before his gaze fell on us. His smile faltered. The silence that followed was deafening. He wasn't a fool. The closeness, the tension in the air, it was all too obvious. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice low but edged with steel. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. Words refused to come. The man beside me shifted, stepping forward. "She deserves better," he said firmly, breaking the silence with a truth I hadn't even spoken aloud. "You don't see her anymore." "But I do." The room erupted. My husband's face turned red with fury. "You betray me, in my own house?" His voice cracked with both anger and disbelief. Tears pricked my eyes, but I stood tall, my voice finally breaking free. "I've been invisible to you for years. Last night wasn't a mistake, it was the first time I've felt alive in so long." The words cut deeper than I'd imagined. His shoulders stiffened, his fists clenched, but beneath the rage was hurt. Real, raw hurt. For a moment, I thought he might strike his friend, or me, but instead, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The silence left behind was unbearable. My chest heaved, my hands trembling. I had destroyed everything, yet a strange weight lifted from me. His best friend stepped closer, his hand brushing mine, steadying me. His eyes burned with both guilt and determination. "This won't be easy," he said softly. "But I don't regret a thing. Do you?" I closed my eyes, tears spilling down my cheeks. When I opened them, I met his gaze with trembling certainty. "No. I don't." The choice had been made. Consequences would come crashing down around us, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. Prompt, the storm had passed. The house, once filled with shouts and slammed doors, now sat in silence. I stood by the window, watching as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink. My heart still ached from the confrontation, from the wreckage of everything I thought was unshakable. Yet, in that ache, there was also clarity. I heard footsteps behind me, slower this time, careful. When I turned, he was there, his expression gentle, hesitant, almost afraid of breaking the fragile air between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The truth had already been laid bare. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice raw. "Not for what I feel, but for how it happened. You didn't deserve to be caught in that kind of pain." I swallowed hard, blinking back the sting of fresh tears. "And yet, I've never felt more seen than when I'm with you." He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, as though giving me time to retreat if I wanted. But I didn't move. I couldn't. When his hand reached for mine, our fingers finally intertwined, not with hesitation this time, but with certainty. The warmth of his touch spread through me, calming the storm in my chest. I looked up, and there it was in his eyes, not just desire, but devotion. The kind of love that had been missing from my life for far too long. We stood there in the soft glow of twilight, the air between us no longer charged with forbidden tension but with quiet acceptance. He pulled me closer, his arms wrapping around me in an embrace that felt like home. My cheek rested against his chest, and for the first time in years, I exhaled fully, as if my soul had been holding its breath until now. "You know this won't be easy," I whispered against him. "Nothing worth it ever is," he replied, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "But I promise, I'll fight for us. I'll fight for you." The words sank deep, wrapping around my heart like a vow. My past, messy and broken, still lingered in the background. But in that moment, I knew it didn't define me anymore. What mattered was the man holding me now, the bond that had grown stronger in the fire of everything we had faced. I tilted my face upward, meeting his gaze. Slowly, tenderly, he kissed me, not rushed, not reckless, but with the kind of patience that said we had all the time in the world now. A kiss that sealed not just passion, but promise. When we finally parted, his forehead leaned against mine, our breaths mingling in the soft light. I smiled through my tears, feeling a rare blend of peace and excitement. "Whatever happens," I said, "we face it together." And he nodded, eyes glistening with emotion. Together. Outside, the stars began to appear, tiny sparks in the dark sky, mirroring the sparks that had finally found their place between us. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. I was ready to step into it, hand in hand with him. The story that began in shadows had found its ending in light. And it wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning.